This may seem like an unusual lecture to have in this class, but I realized over the last year or so that this is a very important one that students often don't understand, because as a student, you're able to use just about anything you want in your schoolwork, and you don't have to pay for it or ask the writer for permission or anything like that. But that's because you're in college and you're using it for educational purposes. So you're protected under laws called fair use of copyrighted material. However, once you graduate and get out of here and are no longer in school and you're making money and you're working, all bets are off. All those fair use laws no longer apply to you, really. Perhaps in some cases if you're working in a nonprofit, but not really. So I wanted to talk some about copyrighted material and fair use and a way around that. And my whole point is to kind of scare you not to use copyrighted material in any way, shape, or form. And you might not even know what copyrighted material is. Copyright is complicated. It's a very legal kind of thing with lots and lots of laws. It is the protection of a creator's work. Now, I'm a novelist and a playwright, so I have a lot of things that I have written. And I don't want someone else to download my book in some kind of form, reformat it, and then try to sell it. Okay, I worked really hard to write my books. It's not that I'm making a lot of money off of them, but they're still something I've worked very hard on. So I don't want someone else taking my work. No one else does either. You can imagine, that's stealing. So my books have copyright protection. To qualify for that, a work, and by work I mean really anything that's creative. We'll get to the definition there a little bit later, but the whole idea is that it's in some sort of tangible form. It could be a poem, a song, music, artwork, novel, play, film, all of those. To qualify for the copyright protection, the work must be fixed in a tangible medium of expression. Can't just be your ideas. Ideas cannot be copyrighted. Only something that's in a physical form of some sort, tangible medium of expression. It must be original, independently created by the author, and the result of at least some creative effort. Now, obviously, the first one is pretty clear, but the second and the third one have led to lots and lots of court cases over the years, because someone will come along and say, well, I helped them with that idea, so it wasn't independently created. And other times it might seem that whatever is being protected really didn't seem to have very much creative effort. It doesn't say that it has to be good creative effort. It just says it has to be creative effort. So that one's tricky too. All of these have a lot of wiggle room in them legally. Copyright shelters only fixed, original, and creative expression, not the ideas or facts upon which the expression is based. So if I were going to write a book, and I have done this, where I use research from a book, facts that are found, like statistics or something, I can use those. But I have to put them in my own words, and that's the difference. I can't just take a big chunk and stick it in my book. So it's the expression that is protected, not the facts or the ideas, and that's kind of tricky too. A work is considered published when the author makes it available to the public on an unrestricted basis, which means that anybody can get it. Now they may have to pay for it through a firewall or something like that, but it is there. In order to get a copyright, and I belong to writers groups over the time, and people are always concerned about copyright, and they think they have to send money to the Library of Congress and fill out forms and everything like that, and you don't. All you need to get a copyright or for it to be protected is to put on the item, and usually in a book this is done on the back of the title page, the word copyright with the C in a circle, the date of the publication, and then the name of either the author or the owner of the copyright. And you say, well, wouldn't the author be the owner? Not necessarily. My first novels I published, they were copyrighted by the publisher, not by me. Eventually, they gave me the rights back, and now the books, I have the rights, and I can, it's interesting, I can take my book, take my words, and I can put them in a different form, but I can't use their format, the way they put the book together and laid it out. I can't do that. But I can take my words back because that's my expression. They, however, had they had a cover that was, I can't use the cover. I can't use the font they used in the layout of the book. As far as the terms of how long a work is published, all works published in the United States before 1924 are in the public domain. Now notice that's the United States. It's not always true in other countries. That means if you were to, let's say, want to put together a bunch of short stories that were written in the late 1800s, they're in the public domain. Maybe. This issue is complicated since the laws changed in specific years, and the heirs of a creator can renew the copyright for a certain amount of time, and that's when it gets sticky. So William Faulkner, for example, wrote before 1924, but his heirs were able to renew the copyright for another 70-some years. So it's sort of the life of the author and then some other time. It's the length of copyright is very complicated. I said all that to say that you should not assume that anything is not copyrighted. You should assume that it is copyrighted unless you can make sure it's not, and because you don't want to get in trouble. So that brings us to the question of fair use. Fair use is a copyright principle based on the belief that the public is entitled to freely use portions of copyrighted materials for purposes of commentary and criticism. Notice, purposes of commentary and criticism. If you want more information about this subject, this is the place to go. The fair use at Stanford University. They have a lot of good, very clear information about it. It's complicated, but it's clear. Fair use is any copying of copyrighted material done for limited and transformative purpose, such as to comment upon, criticize, or parody a copyrighted work, which is kind of interesting. In other words, you can make fun of copyrighted work, but you can't just take portions of it and use it in your own and say it belongs to you. Fair use depends on 4 factors: the purpose and character of your use, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount, and it's not just the amount, but how much of the portion takes up the whole. It's like 20% is the most for a poem, for example, or a song, and the effect of the use upon the potential market. So we're back to the idea that if you can't just say, oh, fair use, and copy something, and teachers get in trouble with this. They copy something and pass it out in class. There have been a lot of court cases about that. Um, even though I can use something for educational purposes, I can't just every semester copy a page from a book, copy a chapter from a book, and pass it out to my students. And I can't really um, take it and make a PDF of it and put it online either. That's the same thing, just because I didn't print it out. So fair use is tricky as well, and it has certain things that you don't want to do. Which brings us to this question of Creative Commons. I'm a big Creative Commons fan. So, along with my novels that I've copyrighted, I have been involved in the last few years in a big project called Open Educational Resources. And there could not be any open educational resources, that is, free textbooks, as students think of them, without Creative Commons, which started in the late 90s as they don't like you to say this, but it's an alternative or modified copywriting or licensing system for shareable content. It has variety of levels and usage and permissions, and it's sort of an agreed upon, if you use one of these, you will respect the rights of the people. So, for example, in 2015, Dr. Barton and I received a grant to write a speech textbook. And at the time, I didn't realize that it would control my life for the next 5 years. But it did. And so we started to write this book. And we started with two things. A bunch of lectures I already had because I had written up all my lectures for another class. And another book that was in the public domain. It was an open educational resource on public speaking. It wasn't very good, though. It didn't look very good. And we wanted ours to look good, to look like a real book, and to be usable. So we started working. We decided we would have 15 chapters, and we would use some of this book that was open educational resource. And it was licensed under Creative Commons. And then I'll show you the licenses in a minute. But their license said that we could use it freely. We didn't even have to say, in fact, the author preferred us not to say where we got it from, to just use it. And so we used some of it in the first edition, and it's still, there are little dregs of it still in the fourth edition, but mostly we've gotten rid of it. So that was the start of our book. Well, as some of you know, Dr. Barton died in 2016, right before the book was supposed to start being used. And that made life interesting. And the first version was not that good. Second version was a little better. Third version was a lot better. And the fourth version is very good. So this book has become very popular. It's used all over the world. I get emails several times a week of people who telling me they're using the book, something we never expected. But anybody who uses that book, any teacher who uses it in their public speaking class, can take the book and do whatever they want with it. They can add to it, take away from it, use parts of it, you take some of it and then rewrite their own sections. They're allowed to do whatever they want as long as they say that it was based on our book. So that we get the credit. I get no money. It wouldn't matter if millions of people use it. I get no money because under the grant that we got from the university system, we can't use the money. We can't charge for it. They paid us. That's all we got. So all that is what Creative Commons is about. We have, with Creative Commons, 6 different licenses. Now, I'm not going to read these to you. You can stop this and read these. This is too much text on a slide, I realize, but this is the typical explanation of what each Creative Commons license means. And they would put that symbol there, and anybody who would see it would know that it means certain things. For example, the first one just means it was by somebody, and that you can pretty much do whatever you want to with the material. Now, I don't like that one because I think you have to protect yourself a little bit. But as it says, it's recommended for maximum dissemination. Then you have succeedingly a little bit harder. In some, they have the word ND, which means you can't change it any. You can use it, but you can't change it. Then you have versions that you can use it, but you can't in any way get any money out of it. That's what the line through the dollar bill means. No one can charge. So no one can charge for the book that we wrote. And then it goes up. And the last one is the most stringent one, restrictive. Now, why did I go into all of this? Well, obviously, in the time of the internet, there is a lot more going on. There's so much information and so many things out there that we kind of have this idea that if it's on the internet, it's fair use. I can do anything with it. No, I'm trying to keep you guys from getting in trouble when you go into the workplace. That you don't borrow something and use it in a PowerPoint or a newsletter or an ad campaign or public relations or something like that and get yourself in trouble because you've used copyrighted material. If you're using it for any type of monetary, that's not fair use. Fair use is basically educational or for learning purposes. So you can't say, well, my company is doing this and we're really not making much money out of it. No, it doesn't matter. And I'll explain the Roadrunner here in a little bit, but you know where I'm going with that. So the Creative Commons is a way to use some already creative material. If you find something, and you can, Google Creative Commons images for flowers if you like, and these would be things that you could use that are not, but you need to watch because that's not always infallible. You want to be sure that what you're using is protected or under Creative Commons and you're not using something. And photographs are this way. You can't just use any photograph you've seen. Photographs are the work of a photographer. The taking of the picture is their artwork. So you can't just randomly use photographs. You have to be sure it's Creative Commons. Now you might say, well, it's the Eiffel Tower. It's a photo of the Eiffel Tower. That I should be able to use it. Not if it's the work of a photographer and it's under copyright. So please be very careful about these kinds of things. Get permission if you're going to use something, but since getting permission is really a hassle and you usually have to pay, it's better to create it yourself. If you're not creative, there are websites you can go to that have, again, stock material, or often you have to pay for those, or you can find Creative Commons kinds of things. Again, be sure it's under the right license. If it says can't make money off of it, then you can't use it. And then the last option is to pay somebody to provide the artwork that you want. You do not want to have any trademark infringement. And some of you probably know that back in the 70s when, we had our ball team in the past, they used the Roadrunner from the Warner Brothers as in their advertising for the team and got in trouble. We don't like to talk about that, but there was Warner Brothers came after the college for using the Roadrunner from the cartoons. So it's you say, well, it's a college. No, it doesn't matter. Uh, it was a trademark infringement. It was something they owned, that Roadrunner image. Now they don't own the term Roadrunner because that's an animal, but that visual depiction. And even if you could try to maybe change it a little bit, but you'd get in trouble if you just changed it a little bit. So this relates to your PowerPoints. It relates to all kinds of work. Don't infringe on copyrights. Thank you.